Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know that I think preparing is incredibly important. It's one of the few things in the interview process that you can actually control. But what happens if you're going to be interviewing for a job, but the job description or the information you've been given is incredibly sparse? There is very little information and you're literally walking into it not knowing what the job exactly is going to be. Well, in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to prepare for an opportunity just like that. I'm going to show you the things you can do that are applicable to just about every single role when you're interviewing, and I'm going to show you interview questions you want to ask them so that you can leave the interview knowing a lot more about the role than when you came in. Let's go. Hi everybody, I'm Ben White with Ben Talks Talent. I've got 12 years experience in interviewing, hiring, and recruiting. And I'm passionate about using my experience to help you become the best candidate possible and land your next job. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something that's really interesting, and it's interviewing for a role when you don't have all the information. So maybe a recruiter sent you an email and there's not a lot of information. Maybe the job description was just a bit sparse. I'm going to teach you how to prepare for that. But before we get into the video, do me a favor. If you are new here, take 3 seconds, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and hit that notification bell. That way you never miss one of my free videos. They're all designed to help you become a more effective interviewer. And if you are not new, well, hey, you look great today. Welcome back. Now, let's get into the video. Now, why would this happen? Why would you ever be finding yourself in a position where you're interviewing for a job and you just don't know a whole heck of a lot of the details? Well, it's actually more common than you think. For one, you might be in a position where you can't be incredibly picky or choosy about a job. You need a job. There's a job that seems to line up with your experience, so you're going to interview, regardless of how robust the job description is. Maybe you're working with a third-party recruiter and they've given you a little bit of information, but it's just not enough to fully understand the scope of the role. So there are a lot of reasons why it's going to happen, potentially from time to time in your career. Now, there are 2 things you can do about this. Let's get into the first one. Now, the first one is create something I like to call an impact list. Now, an impact list is talking about the things you have done in your career so you can use them to answer a variety of different questions. So, for example, what I want you to do is think about all the different jobs you've had. Let's say you've had 3 main jobs in your career. What I want you to do is I want you to think about the most significant thing you accomplished in that job, right? And write that down on a piece of paper. My suggestion is do 1 to 3 for 1 to 3 jobs. That way you have anywhere from 3 to 9 examples that you can use to answer interview questions. So let's just say the first one is you implemented a system in your current role that allowed your company to save $10,000 a month. Okay, that's an incredibly vague, nebulous example, but let's just say that's the example you want to use. What I want you to then do is talk about how long it took. So write down, how long did it take me to do this? How many people were involved? What was the biggest struggle along the way? What would I do over again if I could do this project again? What was the biggest learning moment? What was the aha moment? But you get what I'm saying. What I want you to do is refamiliarize yourself with the different details, and here's why. When you don't know a lot about the job, it's hard to prepare for the questions they might ask you. Now, you can prepare for the common interview questions, and I would absolutely recommend you do that. If you don't know where to do that, go to the playlist on my channel called Interview Question and Answers. I've got like 25 videos on some of the most common interview questions, and I show you specifically how to answer them. But in addition to that, by creating an impact list with 3 to 9 examples, you will get the type of information you can use to satisfy a variety of different interview questions. So your first example, you're writing, save my company $10,000 a month by implementing this system. Here are the details. Imagine they give you a question that says, can you tell me about a time where you were able to single-handedly save your company money? And will you be like, oh yeah, absolutely. Here's the example. They might ask you a question like, tell me about a time you had to work collaboratively with people outside of your vertical in the organization. And maybe in this project, not only did you work with your team, but you worked on people from other teams to make it happen. Then it's also an example for that. What I'm getting at here is by creating an impact list, what you do is you refamiliarize yourself with a bunch of great information that is going to allow you to answer questions on the fly. Let's get to the second thing. Now, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to go online and I want you to go to Indeed.com, and then I want you to find a similar job description in a similar industry, assuming you know the industry. If not, just find a very similar job. So if you're a mechanical engineer, find a mechanical engineering job posting. Then what I want you to do is I want you to compare that job description hopefully it's a pretty generic, relatively accurate job description with your resume. And look at all the must-haves, right? The ideal candidate will have A, B, C, D, and E. Say it's 5 years experience in CNC machining. Then I want you to write next to it how many years you have. What you're doing here is you're creating an experience, alignment, misalignment checklist. You're going through the list of things from an experiential standpoint that you have, so you can go through and be like, yes, I checked that box. You want 5 years? I've got 7. You said you want somebody who has experience with blueprints? Check. I'm very familiar with blueprints. You want someone who's familiar with the Microsoft suite and is a strong Excel user? I would rate myself an 8 out of 10 on Excel. But basically, what you're doing is you're preparing yourself to talk to the main qualifications of the role. And then the points where you're misaligned, right? So say they want blank years of something you don't have. Well, you know you don't have it. You know it might come up. And now you can prepare to speak to it. So maybe you talk about how you learned a similar technology in a previous role on the job and you were able to ramp up relatively quickly. Well, that's the type of example you want to have. So generally speaking, I am always in favor of these things. Always create an impact list and always create a job description, alignment, misalignment checklist. That way you can go and say, yes, yes, yes. And while I don't have this, here's why you shouldn't be concerned about that. So that is the second thing you can do. Now let's jump into some of the questions. These are questions that if I was you and I was interviewing, I would say to myself, I came in here without a really good idea of what it is they're looking for. I'm not going to leave with the same problem. I'm going to ask the following questions so I know what exactly this job entails. Now the first question is a really basic one, but it's essential because you don't have the basic information for the job. And the question is, how will this person spend their time in this role? You could say on a week-to-week basis, you can say on a day-to-day basis, you can say on a month-to-month basis, whatever, but ask them what this person's gonna be doing and ask them in depth. Could you explain in depth? Sometimes when I'm actually talking with a client and I want to understand the functions of a role, I'll ask them to explain it to me in percentages. Could you make me a pie chart? What is this person going to be spending their time doing on a standard day? It's important just so you understand the basics of the role, so I'd start there. Now the second thing I'd ask is what is the most challenging component of the role? Or what about this role will be the most difficult thing for the person coming into it to handle? Either one of those versions of the question is great, but whenever you don't know a lot about, like a lot of information about a job description, what you're also missing is what is going to be hard. And you want to make sure that the job isn't going to be too difficult, too challenging, or have unrealistic expectations. Asking a question like this forces them, I call it a negative prompt. A negative prompt is something sometimes when they ask you, what's your greatest weakness? For you, a negative prompt might be saying, what is the most challenging aspect of this role? And it forces them to not just be all sunshine and rainbows, but to give you some of the actual information about the challenging components of the role. So you want to ask this. If you know nothing about the role, you have to know what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis, and you should absolutely know what the challenges you're going to encounter. So that's question 2. Question 3 is really important because we're talking about the long-term health of this role. And that question is, what does this person need to accomplish within the first 12 months in order for you to consider this person to be a success? Right here, what you are doing is say, hey, if you hire me 12 months from now, what do I need to do for you to say, that was a great hire? That's important because you need to determine, are you capable of that? And is that, in general, realistic? I would never accept a role without knowing what my year 1 deliverables are, because I need to look at that and go, yeah, I can do that, or no, I can't. Anytime you move, you make a career move, you take a new job, that right there, that's risk. There is risk associated with moving, but to mitigate that risk, you need to find out what you're expected to deliver. Lastly, the last question is, how is this person measured on a weekly basis from a KPI, metric, or measurable standpoint? Again, when I first started out as a recruiter, there was weekly goals we had to hit. We had to have 3 people being sent out to interview and 3 new jobs to work on every single week. And come hell or high water, at the end of those weeks, you needed to have 3 and 3. For me, just learning, that wasn't always realistic. But you, as someone going into a role, don't you want to know what the measurables are and if that's realistic for you, I would absolutely ask that. It is so important to know how they're going to be measuring you, how they're going to be grading you on a weekly basis. What are you expected from an output standpoint? If you don't know that, I would be really hard pressed to take the job. So there you go. Those are my 4 questions. If you ask these 4 questions, you will walk out of that interview with a much better idea of what that job entails than when you walked in. Good luck in your next interview. You got this.